There are truths that once you touch them, you can never return to who you were. They do not bring joy, they bring clarity, and once you are awake, you cannot pretend to sleep again. I once believed in the story most of us grew up with, that life is fair, that as long as you live kindly and work hard, everything will eventually turn out well. I believed that for many years because that belief made the world seem safer, more orderly, and easier to live in. But life does not work that way. The world is unfair. Not everyone is sincere, and sometimes blind effort only makes you exhausted faster. I learned that from someone I once trusted, a person who once said he would never betray me, and then did precisely that, not out of malice but for his own benefit. At first I tried to justify it. I told myself, maybe it was just a misunderstanding, perhaps he was under some pressure, but gradually I realized he did what he thought was best for himself. And strangely, once I understood that I was no longer angry, I just saw more clearly. I realized that most of the pain in life does not come from what people do to us, but from the illusions we build about them. The illusion that everyone has good intentions, the illusion that fairness is natural, the illusion that if we live rightly, life will treat us gently. But life does not operate by our emotional sense of justice. It operates by nature, the laws of human behavior, and the real motives hidden behind their actions. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When I first read that line, I thought he talked about calmness. Now I understand he was talking about truth, the truth that you are only powerful when you dare to see life as it is, without exaggeration, without dreaming, without painting it prettier than it is. The Stoics called that dangerous wisdom, not because it makes you cruel to others, but because it makes you impossible to deceive, manipulate, and be caught in the illusions that most people cling to. But the clearer you see, the lonelier you become, because most people do not want the truth, they only wish to be comforted. They want to believe that good people will win, that every pain has a reason, that everyone has a heart like theirs. But once you stop believing that you are no longer like them, the price of awareness is solitude, but you find something else, freedom within that solitude. Freedom from expectations, freedom from the need to be understood, agreed with, and loved in a certain way. Freedom to see life exactly as it is, and still choose to stand tall. I am not saying this is an easy path, it is difficult. But it is the path of those who want to see clearly, to live truthfully, and to rule themselves. Marcus Seneca and Epictetus lived among betrayal, wars, and chaos, yet they remained calm because they had learned to see through illusion. After many years, I understood that wisdom is not knowing more but being less deluded. It is the courage to see things as they are, no more, no less. It is to face the truth even when it is not beautiful. And that is the path I want you to walk with me today. 8 ruthless lessons, not because they hurt you, but because they force you to stop lying to yourself. They will make you see clearer, calmer, and freer. If you are ready to see life with naked eyes, walk with me, because once you begin to see clearly, you will never want to go back. Let us begin with the first lesson. People act out of emotion, not reason. Lesson 1. People act out of emotion, not reason. This is the first lesson and the foundation for everything that follows. Because if you do not understand this, you will always be disappointed in others and yourself. We like to believe that we are rational beings, that we think, analyze, and then act. But the truth is, most of what we do begins with emotion, and reason only comes afterward as a legal advocate for a decision that the heart has already approved. I witnessed this in myself. Once after a meeting, I decided to buy a new car. I told everyone it was a practical choice, that my old car was wearing out, that I needed it for work. But when I looked deeper, the reason was simple. I wanted to feel that I was progressing and succeeding. The car was only a symbol of that feeling. I did not buy it because I needed it. I bought it because I wanted to be seen as someone moving forward. And I realized that most of our decisions are like that, born out of emotion, then justified by logic. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the wise learn to observe their emotions without being controlled by them. He did not say emotions are destructive. He said we must learn to recognize them before we act. But most people do the opposite. They react, then regret. They say things they should not say, send messages they should not send, and do things they wish they could take back only minutes later. Think of the last time you were angry. Were you thinking or trying to release what was boiling inside you? Most likely, you did not speak to solve the problem you talked to. Make the other person feel what you felt. That is how emotion deceives us, making us believe we are reacting reasonably, when in truth we are only soothing a wounded ego. I once had a close friend who constantly argued with his father. Every time his father offered advice, he would explode. He said his father did not understand that he was too controlling, but what he feared was not control. It was the feeling of smallness in front of someone who knew all his flaws. When I saw that, I realized their conflict was not about opinions, but emotions. One sought to assert power, the other to protect pride. When you understand that everyone around you is also driven by emotion, you become less angry, less surprised, and less hurt. The colleague does not dislike you because you are wrong, but because you make them feel inferior. The ex does not act cold because love is gone, but because they want to regain control. Humans rarely act according to logic. They act to protect the feelings they have about themselves. Epictetus taught that we should not argue with someone who is angry, because in that state they are not seeking truth, but relief. And that applies to every relationship. When you see someone overreact, do not rush to counter with logic, because logic cannot pierce the wall of emotion. Acknowledge the feeling first, then invite them to see the issue with you. I began to apply this in my own life. When a co-worker lost his temper, I stopped trying to prove I was right. I said, I understand why you feel that way. That simple sentence has more power than any argument, because once you touch the emotion, reason finally has a way in. The Stoics did not teach us to deny emotion, they taught us to control our response. When you feel anger, fear, hurt, or excitement, pause, observe, and ask, what am I feeling, and what is this emotion trying to make me do? That pause is the space of freedom. Marcus said there is a space between stimulus and response. In that space, we have the power to choose our reaction. That is where true wisdom begins. Others act by instinct, but the one who understands himself acts by choice. When you realize that most people let emotions steer their lives, you will see something frightening and liberating, that most actions in this world are not personal toward you. They are reactions to fears, pride, or unhealed wounds. Once you understand this, you no longer need to be angry at their words or dragged into the waves of their emotions. You stand still, you observe, and you choose your own response. And here is where you begin to see the second lesson. When you understand that people act from emotion, you also start to see another law. Behind every action lies a motive, a benefit, whether they admit it or not. And to truly see human nature, you must understand the next lesson, the one both Marcus and Seneca reminded us of. Lesson 2. People always act in their own interest. This was one of the most brutal truths for me to accept, because it goes against everything we were taught growing up. We were told to believe in kindness, give without expectation, and trust that when someone helps us, it is because they care. But the longer I lived, the more I realized that people rarely do anything completely selfless. Beneath every action, whether kind or cruel, there is always a motive. I once had a neighbor named Linda. She was the kind of person everyone in the neighborhood adored, always smiling, bringing cookies, and always being the first to lend a hand. I used to think she was among the kindest people I had ever met, until one day I learned she was preparing to run for city council. And of course, those acts of kindness were part of her campaign strategy. What surprised me most, though, was my own reaction. At first I felt disappointed, even deceived. But after a while I understood. She was not fake. She was genuinely kind and also genuinely smart. She had found a way to make helping others align with her progress. Seneca once wrote that there is nothing wrong with acting in your own interest as long as it does not harm others. That is why understanding this law does not make us cynical, it makes us realistic. Instead of expecting others to sacrifice for us, we learn to look at what drives their choices. When we understand what they gain from helping us, we know how to cooperate, and we no longer feel betrayed when they do not act as we think they should. A friend once told me, "If you want to understand someone truly, do not listen to what they say, watch what they pursue when no one is watching." That line haunted me for years because it was brutally true. When I started observing, I realized that most kindness is not unconditional. Those who help often seek the feeling of being needed. Those who teach usually crave admiration. Those who listen frequently want to feel valuable. And none of this is evil, it is simply human. Marcus Aurelius, though an emperor, understood this well. He wrote that when you wake up in the morning, remember that you will meet selfish, ungrateful, and deceitful people who act that way only because they do not know what is good. He did not resent them, he accepted that this is human nature. And once you understand nature, you stop being angry. I once had an exceptionally talented colleague. He always seemed generous at work, helping me refine presentations, sharing valuable materials no one else had, and offering encouragement. I once thought he genuinely wanted me to grow, but I later realized he truly wanted to be seen as a mentor, a leader. When I understood that I no longer felt used, I saw more clearly and learned how to balance the relationship without resentment. The Stoics did not see self-interest as sin, they saw it as instinct. Epictetus said that if you try to force someone to act against their interest, you are fighting nature itself. They taught that instead of expecting goodness, we should seek alignment. Instead of demanding sacrifice, we should find where our interests meet. When two people benefit together, the relationship becomes sustainable. I began to look at every interaction through a new lens, asking what this person truly wants. Not what they say, but what they silently aim for. It could be money, recognition, or simply the feeling of being loved. When I understood that, I no longer felt deceived. I just saw more clearly how the world worked. A friend once asked me if everyone acts out of self-interest, does love or kindness still exist? I said, of course it does, but not in the way you think. When someone loves you, they still act out of self-interest. But that interest is their joy in being loved back, their sense of meaning in making you happy. Genuine kindness is not the absence of self-interest, it is when your benefit merges with another's. When you understand this, you stop being disappointed. You stop asking why people break promises, change, or do not treat you as you treated them. They are not betraying you, they are simply following their nature. And when you no longer resent that, you gain the ability to negotiate with life. You learn how to talk, cooperate, and step back when needed. This is the second dangerous wisdom, seeing the hidden interest behind every action. When you understand motives, you are no longer fooled by appearances. You read people as if their minds were open books, and when the world is no longer a mystery, you begin to live deliberately instead of reactively. And from here a new question arises. If most people act out of emotion and self-interest, why do so many still suffer in the same cycles, make the same mistakes, and keep blaming circumstances? The answer lies in the next lesson, which few are brave enough to face. Lesson 3. Most people cannot handle the truth about themselves. This is one of the loneliest lessons to learn, because once you begin to see it, you realize that the world around you runs on illusions that people create to survive. They do not live in truth, they live inside the story they tell themselves every day, repeatedly, until even they believe it is real. I once had a close friend named Mark. He always complained that he never got promoted, that his boss was biased, and that the company was unfair. He said this for 3 years, and for those 3 years I watched him come to work late, abandon projects, and avoid responsibility whenever things went wrong. One day I asked him honestly, "Do you think you haven't been promoted? It might be because you haven't done your best yet." He smiled, but his eyes went dim. Then he said, "You don't understand, everything is rigged." That was when I realized it was not that he could not see the truth, but he could not bear it, because if he admitted that the problem was him, he would have to change, and change is painful. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the wise man is willing to see his own faults before pointing out the faults of others. But that is something few people dare to do. It is easy to see what others do wrong, but we are blind to ourselves. Not because we are ignorant, but because the mind has a defense mechanism. It protects the ego, the image we want to believe about ourselves. Seneca called it the fogged mirror, where we only see the parts of ourselves we wish to see. A person who thinks of himself as kind will always find reasons to justify his selfishness. An arrogant man will call his arrogance confidence. A fearful person will rename his fear caution. Everything is repainted in softer, prettier, and more comforting hues. I remember the first time I realized I was doing the same thing. I had failed a project. I blamed the market, the partners, and bad luck. I told everyone that the circumstances were against me. But deep down, I knew the real reason. I had been lazy. I procrastinated. I let the fear of failure hold me back, but admitting that felt like cutting into my own pride. So I chose the easier way, blaming the outside world. When we cannot face the truth, we create a false world. We wear masks, we tell others and ourselves that we are fine, that we are doing our best, that things fell apart because of them, it, or circumstance. And every time we repeat that lie, we tighten the chains of illusion around us. Epictetus once said that a person cannot be healed until they recognize they are sick. But most people never admit they are wrong. They would rather live in pain than face shame. They would rather believe they are victims than think they have the power to change. I had a cousin who spent his life saying that people were unfair to him. He told everyone he used them, and everyone turned away. But when I looked closer, I saw that he only wanted to receive and never to give. When someone offered advice, he said they did not understand. When he failed, he said that fate was against him. He could not bear the thought that his life resulted from his choices. Even as an emperor, Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal every day to examine himself. He did not write for others to read, he wrote to see himself without disguise. He recorded even his petty thoughts, his anger, his mistakes. That is why he was strong. He did not hide from the truth. True strength does not come from always being right. It comes from being willing to see when you are wrong and to correct it. When you dare to look inward, when you can say, "I am the cause," you begin to have absolute power, because if the cause is within you, the solution is too. This is what makes the Stoics different. They do not fear the truth even when it is ugly. They do not run from their mistakes, they learn from them. Marcus once said, "No one is defeated by the truth, only by their refusal to see it." I began training myself to self-reflect every day. When something went wrong, I asked, "What part of this is mine?" When someone hurt me, I wondered, "How did I allow this to happen?" When I failed, I asked what warning signs I had ignored. Each question was a mirror, and I saw more clearly each time I dared to look into it. Not comfortably, but freely. Most people go through life without ever truly meeting themselves. They fear the truth about who they are more than they fear failure, because truth strips away every layer of protection. But when you dare to face it and look straight at what is unflattering within you, you will stop fearing others. You will stop fearing criticism, judgment, or misunderstanding, because you have already seen the worst in yourself and are still standing. This is the third dangerous wisdom: to face the truth about yourself. It makes you humbler, clearer, and harder to wound, because the one who knows who he is cannot be defined by anyone else. And once you are brave enough to see yourself clearly, you will also begin to see others. But that clarity comes with a difficult consequence, because when you change and grow, not everyone will celebrate it. And that is when you must face the fourth lesson. Lesson 4. Your success will make some people hate you. This is the lesson no one wants to believe until they live it. We all grow up thinking that if we do well, are kind and work hard, everyone will be happy for us. But at some point you realize that the higher you rise, the smaller your circle becomes. And it is not because you have changed, but because your light makes others see their shadows more clearly. I saw this happen when a close friend of mine started his own company. In the early days, everyone cheered him on. When he was struggling, people wished him luck, sent encouragement, and supported his dream. But something shifted when his company began to succeed. His name appeared in the news, and his peers were still stuck where they were. Congratulations turned into half-joking, half-bitter remarks. "Must be luck. Guess you're too rich for us now." He never argued, only smiled. But behind that smile, I saw the quiet sadness in his eyes. Marcus Aurelius once said, "When you do the right thing, do not expect applause." The Stoics understood that success brings not only admiration but envy. Seneca called it a natural law of weak souls, because when people witness your success, they do not just see you, they see themselves, the person they could have been, the chances they missed, the version of themselves they were too afraid to become. And instead of facing that truth, they choose the easier path to resent you. I went through something similar. When I began to succeed in my career, the people who once felt close grew distant. They did not attack me, they just grew silent. I remember a friend saying to me, "You've changed." It sounded harmless, but inside it was an accusation. I thought about it for a long time. Had I really changed? Maybe I had, but not in the way she meant. I no longer wanted to complain about life, no longer agreed with procrastination, and no longer dimmed myself to make others comfortable. And for those who stayed the same, my growth was a threat. Friends and advisors betrayed Marcus himself. Even as an emperor, he wrote in Meditations, "When your success troubles others, take it as a test of humility." He chose not to fight the envy, but to keep moving forward. Because the Stoics knew that you cannot control others' emotions, only your response to them. Seneca also wrote, "People do not hate you because you are better than them. They hate you because you remind them of their limits." And that is brutally true. No one likes to be forced to look in the mirror before they are ready. I learned that you should never dim your light to make others comfortable. If someone cannot stand your light, they can turn away or light their own fire. You do not need to dim yourself so they feel less blinded. If you keep doing that, you will soon forget who you are. Once I asked an older mentor how to face envy without becoming bitter. He said, "Be grateful even for those who dislike you, because they remind you that you are moving forward." That line silenced me. I began to understand that envy is not a sign of failure, but growth. When you are no longer on the same floor, the noise from below gets louder. So do not be afraid when someone is unhappy about your progress. Do not rush to explain. Do not try to prove you are still the same. They do not need your reassurance. They need time to face themselves. As for you, keep going. Because if you stop to please them, you will soon find yourself back where no one envies you, but also where no one wants to be you. The Stoics called this the independence of the soul, when you no longer need validation to know you are on the right path. True success is not when everyone likes you, but when you no longer need them to. And when you accept that success always carries the price of isolation, you begin to see the world more clearly. You start to notice that envy and kindness often come with hidden motives. A compliment, a smile, or a harmless invitation can be a subtle persuasion. And that is when you will need the fifth lesson. Lesson 5. Everyone is trying to sell you something. This is the lesson that changes the way you see the world forever. Once you truly understand it, you realize that every conversation, every relationship, and every friendly gesture carries an intention, sometimes explicit, sometimes hidden. Not everyone sells products, but everyone is selling something, an idea, an image, a role, a feeling, or themselves. I once received a message from an old friend I had not spoken to in years. She said she missed me and wanted to grab coffee and catch up. I agreed, thinking it was simply about reconnecting. But I realized it was not about friendship 15 minutes into the conversation. It was about an investment opportunity for which she was trying to recruit me. I was not angry, I just smiled. Because I understood she was not being malicious, acting according to human nature and influencing her to get what she wanted. From that moment, I began to see things differently. A salesperson is not just the one behind a counter, but anyone trying to get you to agree, trust, or act in a way that benefits them. When co-workers compliment you, they might be selling an image of friendliness to win your support for their next project. When someone invites you for a drink, they might sell a story about themselves to gain your interest or sympathy. When someone says, "I just want to help remember," they might really want the feeling of being needed. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Look beneath the surface and see the true nature of things." He lived in a palace where sweet words were often velvet-covered daggers. He understood that if you are not aware, you can easily buy things not with money, but with emotion. The Stoics called this the illusion of goodwill. Seneca once warned, "Do not let praise make you forget that the one who praises also has a purpose." That line sounds cold, but it is actually a form of protection. Because when you know that everyone has their own interest, you stop feeling betrayed when they change, and you stop being naive when someone seems too kind. I remember the first time I saw this clearly at work. A co-worker constantly praised me, calling me visionary, inspiring. Of course it felt good. But a few weeks later, he asked me to sign off on a proposal he had written, one that clearly hurt my team. When I refused, his attitude changed overnight. That was when I understood he was not praising me. He was praising what he needed from me. What's interesting is that this realization did not make me bitter. It made me calmer. I no longer expected anyone to act selflessly because I understood that human behavior runs on exchange, not pure virtue. When we help someone, we receive a sense of meaning. When we love someone, we accept the feeling of being loved. When we support an idea, we are buying a sense of belonging. Epictetus taught, "No one can make you do anything unless you agree." That is the key to not being bought. The Stoics did not avoid transactions, they entered them with awareness. They knew what they were buying at what price, and whether they truly wanted it. I began to apply this in every conversation. When someone said, "I only want what's best for you," I asked myself, who benefits more from this, them or me? When someone shared a sad story, I wondered if they sought understanding or attention. When someone offered a gift, I asked if they were giving it out of joy or from the hope of a future favor. Over time, I learned a rare skill, the ability to listen to words and intentions. This did not make me suspicious, it made me grounded, because when you can see motives clearly, you gain the power to choose. You can agree, decline, or smile without stepping into the trap, and that in itself is freedom. Marcus said, "Stand firm like a rock against which the waves break and let them fall away around you." In this world of endless persuasion, that rock is clarity. When you see what others are selling, you are no longer pulled by it. You observe and you choose what to buy with your will. And here you begin to see a more profound, unsettling truth. If everyone is selling an image, story, or idea, you eventually must ask yourself, what is real? And that is when you arrive at Lesson 6. Lesson 6. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. This is one of the most expensive lessons in life, often paid for with time, trust, and sometimes your heart. Because humans have a strange habit, they believe words more than actions, hope more than truth. When someone reveals their true nature, we often refuse to accept it. Instead, we choose to believe the version of them we wish they were. And that is what keeps us getting hurt again and again. I once had a business partner named David. From the very first day we worked together, something felt off. He talked too much about morality, too much about trust, too much about going far together. And yet in meetings he took credit for group success, shifted blame for mistakes, and quietly avoided the difficult work. I saw all of it. But I told myself, maybe he was just a little selfish like everyone else. I ignored the signs because I wanted to believe he would change. But people do not change because we want them to. They only change when they dare to face themselves. 2 years later, I discovered he had signed a private deal behind my back, taking money without telling anyone. I was not surprised. He had shown me who he was from the start. I just refused to believe it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Observe their actions, not their words. For words can be twisted, but actions cannot." People reveal who they are in minor details, how they talk to a server, respond to rejection, and behave when no one is watching. Every detail is a clue if you are present enough to see it. But most of us do not want to see because the truth is inconvenient to the heart. Seneca said, "People do not change their nature, they only change their masks." It sounds pessimistic, but it is actually a gentle warning. We keep waiting for people to be different, better, more understanding, but in reality, they have shown us exactly who they are from the beginning. It is we who refuse to see. I remember an old relationship. He was always late. There was a new excuse every time. Busy, tired, forgot. And every time I forgave because I did not want to believe that I did not matter enough to be remembered. I told myself, he doesn't mean to, he's just stressed. But after months, I realized the truth. He did not forget that he did not prioritize me. People do not forget what truly matters to them. Epictetus taught, "Do not deceive yourself into thinking someone is different from what their actions show." He understood that self-deception is the root of most pain. When we deny what is obvious, we choose illusion over truth. And every illusion expires. When it breaks, the pain cuts deeper. I learned that no small sign is meaningless. When someone lies about something minor, they can lie about something significant. When someone breaks small promises, they will break substantial commitments. When someone disrespects others in front of you, one day they will disrespect you too. Those are not random moments, they are the pattern of character. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." That lesson is simple but brutal, because believing the truth often hurts more than believing the fantasy. Accepting that someone is selfish, shallow, or indifferent hurts now, but refusing to take it and continuing to hope will hurt you for years. The Stoics believed that observing human nature is how you protect your peace from disappointment. Marcus wrote, "When someone betrays you, do not be surprised. Remind yourself they are acting according to their nature. This does not make you cold, it makes you clear. Because when you stop expecting the impossible, you stop suffering unnecessarily. You start seeing people as they are, not as you wish they would be." It took me years to understand that forgiveness does not mean giving someone another chance. It means accepting that they will not change. Once you believe that you no longer need to be angry, you adjust their place in your life. You do not have to cut people off. You stop giving them roles they cannot play. And once you learn to trust actions more than words, you begin to see the repeating patterns in human behavior. You start to notice that most people do not change, not because they cannot, but because they do not want to leave their comfort zone. And that leads us to another truth, a lesson the Stoics considered the backbone of all growth. Top of form, bottom of form. Lesson 7. Comfort is the enemy of growth. This is the lesson everyone knows, but few truly live by. Because no one wants to admit that it is not pain or hardship, but comfort that quietly weakens us daily. Comfort is like a warm blanket. It holds you, lulls you, makes you believe you are safe. But while you sleep, the world keeps moving. And when you wake, you realize you've been left behind. I once had a good job, steady income, everything enough. No stress, no pressure, no real need to push myself. I drank coffee at the same cafe every morning, met the same few people, and had the same old conversations. I called it balance. But slowly my mind began to dull. I stopped having new ideas. I lost drive. I stopped fearing failure, but I also stopped craving victory. One day, it hit me. I wasn't living. I was drifting. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer not from hardship itself, but from our fear of it." Modern people avoid discomfort at all costs. They choose the path of least resistance, chase instant pleasure, and build safety walls around their lives and call that happiness. But true happiness cannot exist in numbness. It is born from growth, and growth only happens when we step into difficulty. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. As Emperor of Rome, he could have surrounded himself with luxury, yet he chose the battlefield, the cold, the sweat, and the fear. He wrote, "When dawn breaks and you hesitate to rise, remember, you were born to work as a human being." He did not see hardship as punishment, but as training. He knew the mind would become strong only when tested, as steel would be hardened only through fire. I remember the first time I deliberately stepped out of my comfort zone. I signed up to speak in front of a crowd despite being terrified. I stuttered, forgot lines, and trembled hands, but didn't die. And more importantly, I felt alive. The fear didn't vanish, but it became fuel. I realized that my limits expanded a little more whenever I did something uncomfortable. The Stoics had a concept called voluntary discomfort, the deliberate practice of hardship. They chose difficulty so they could no longer control them. Seneca once slept on the floor, wore rough clothes, and ate stale bread for days, reminding himself that if he lost everything, he would still survive one day. They did this not to suffer, but to reclaim freedom from the fear of loss, fear of lack, fear of inconvenience. I began to practice this in small ways. I turned off the air conditioner in the morning to feel the real heat. I took cold showers in winter. I spent one day each month without touching my phone, not to punish myself, but to remind myself that I can endure. And each time I felt a little stronger. Epictetus said, "Do not wish for things to be easier, wish to be stronger." That line changed how I see the world. I realized that hardship is not an obstacle, it is the gym for the mind. Every time you face discomfort, you are training your endurance. Every time you reject the easy option, you are rebuilding your willpower. I have met many people who say they want change, but do not want discomfort. They want a strong body, but not the workout. They want peace of mind, but not solitude. They want success, but not sacrifice. And then they wonder why their life never moves. The truth is simple. You cannot grow inside comfort. Marcus once said, "A lion in a cage may be well fed, but it forgets how to hunt." That line is a warning to everyone living too peacefully. Comfort is the new form of captivity. It has no bars, but it has Netflix food delivery and endless excuses to delay. It does not hurt you, it dulls you. And a dulled soul cannot grow. When you accept hardship as a natural part of life, something changes. The things that once scared you become teachers. Rejection teaches detachment. Solitude teaches steadiness. Failure teaches reflection. Gradually, instead of running from challenges, you seek them because you understand that today's discomfort is the foundation of tomorrow's freedom. The Stoics never sought pain, they sought strength. They understood that true freedom does not come from avoiding difficulty, but from enduring it without losing peace. When you can control your reaction to hardship, you are no longer a victim of life. You become its master. And after all the effort and steps beyond comfort, one final lesson awaits. A lesson the Stoics considered the key to letting go of worry and seeing the true worth of every moment. Lesson 8. You will die, and most of what you worry about is meaningless. It sounds harsh, but this is the most liberating lesson in the Stoic journey. People live as if they were immortal, always thinking, there will be time tomorrow, I'll start when things settle down, I'll do it someday. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us with a cold and awakening truth. Do not fear death, fear never having lived. Death is not the enemy. It is a quiet reminder that your time is slipping away right now. I remember the moment this truth became real. A friend of mine, barely in his 30s, died suddenly of a stroke. We had talked about plans, trips, things we would do someday. But someday never came. At his funeral, I looked around and realized all the things he once worried about, deadlines, opinions, and competition, had vanished. Nothing remained but the memory he left in those who truly loved him. And I understood then, what exhausts us is not life itself, but the illusion that we have endless time. The Stoics lived by a memento mori principle. Remember, you will die. They repeated it not to inspire fear, but to help us live honestly. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short life, but that we waste much of it." When you truly understand the limits of your time, you start to choose more carefully what deserves your energy. You stop getting angry over small things. You stop arguing just to be right. You stop postponing what you know matters. I used to live inside what people call purposeful busyness. But in truth, I was running from stillness. I feared silence because I had to face myself in it. I avoided being alone because it revealed all I hadn't done. Every morning I would reach for my phone, scroll through the world and tell myself I was keeping up. But the more I filled my mind, the less I felt alive. Then one day when my father was in the hospital, he held my hand and said something I'll never forget. "Son, everything you're rushing for will mean nothing if you never learn to slow down." Since that day, I've tried to live as if each day were a gift. I don't always succeed, but I remember I no longer have time to waste. I call the people I once stayed silent with. I say thank you when I have the chance. I forgive when I can. And strangely, by accepting the fragility of life, I've begun to live it more deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Looking at life through the short lens of mortality, you finally see what is worth keeping and what is not. Death does not take away your freedom, it gives meaning to it. The Stoics never ran from death. They looked it in the eye as one looks in a mirror. They knew that you start to live fully when you stop fearing the end. When you realize everything has faded, you love deeper, act braver, and live truer. What would you do differently if you had only 1 year left to live? Would you still delay saying "I'm sorry"? Would you still care what others think? Would you still torture yourself over small mistakes? Or would you finally do the things you've always known were right, but never dared to start? I once thought tomorrow was an opportunity. Now I see it as an illusion. Only today is real. And if you live fully today, you never have to fear tomorrow. Seneca said, "We cannot escape death, but we can escape the fear of living meaninglessly." That is Stoic wisdom at its highest form. To accept the end so you can live with a true beginning. Death does not steal meaning from life, it gives it. So when you remember you will die, you stop wasting time on useless worries. You stop letting fear dictate your choices. You begin to act on what matters, speak what's true, and live as if every moment counts. You realize that petty arguments, jealousy, and criticism lose their weight, because in the end only 3 things truly remain: how you lived, how you loved, and what you left in the hearts of others. And perhaps that is what all 8 lessons have been leading to. The Stoics did not want to teach cold philosophy. They wanted to show us a way of life, a life of awareness, freedom, and sovereignty. When you understand the limits of time, you stop wasting it on illusion. When you stop fearing loss, you begin to value every fleeting moment. And when you live as if you have nothing to lose, you touch what Marcus called the true freedom of the mind. Because in the end, these 8 lessons are not meant to be understood. They are intended to be lived. When you know emotion, you reclaim control. When you understand human nature, you stop being wounded by it. When you know your limits, you begin to change. And when you remember that you will die, you finally start to live. These 8 lessons do not just make you wiser, they make you dangerous in the most beautiful way. Risky because you can no longer be deceived by illusion, no longer be led by emotion, no longer be broken by what you cannot control. You begin to see the world through the eyes of truth. And once you see clearly, you can never unsee it. So if you've come this far or reached this final lesson, prepare to step into the conclusion where all 8 truths merge into one force, not a force to rule others, but to rule yourself. Because when you have learned all 8 lessons, you do not just become wiser, you become free. The final lesson: True freedom. The freedom the Stoics spoke of was never the ability to do whatever you want. It was the power to remain untouched within, to not be pulled by emotions, not to be controlled by others, and not to be shaken by circumstances. It is the kind of freedom that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus devoted their entire lives to understanding the sovereignty of the mind. When you walk through these 8 lessons, you realize they are not separate truths. 8 doors along one path lead you back to the only place where power truly exists inside yourself. You begin by learning to see your emotions without letting them steer you. Then you understand that everyone acts according to their own interests, so you stop expecting fairness or perfection. You learn to face the truth about yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, because that's where transformation begins. You accept that success will always bring envy, so instead of pleasing others, you hold your principles. You realize that everyone is trying to sell something, so you learn to listen beneath the words and stay grounded. You start to trust actions more than promises, setting boundaries with clarity instead of resentment. You understand that comfort kills growth, so you choose difficulty to stay alive and real. And finally, you face death not with fear but with gratitude, to learn how to live every moment fully. When these 8 pieces fall into place, you see the world differently, not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. You stop reacting, you start choosing, you stop wishing for an easy life. You become stronger instead. You stop fighting what's beyond control and return to the one thing that has always been yours, your mind. I once thought wisdom was about knowing more. Now I know it is about needing fewer illusions, fewer expectations, fewer attachments. The truly wise are not those who know everything, but those who know when to stay silent, when to stop, and when not to fight battles that do not matter. Marcus once wrote, "A calm mind is an unassailable fortress." That line, to me, is the essence of Stoicism. When you learn to build your fortress within, the chaos outside can no longer harm you. People may change, circumstances may fall apart, but you remain unmoved, not from coldness, but from clarity. And if you look back at this entire journey, you'll see that every lesson has taught you a form of quiet strength. Not the strength of those who shout, but those who stay silent at the right time. Not the strength of those who always win, but those who remain calm even when they lose. Not the strength of those who seek control, but of those who no longer need it to feel free. When practiced long enough, that strength makes you dangerous, not because you harm anyone, but because no one can hurt you anymore. You see through motives, illusions, and noise. You stay calm amid storms. You stop drifting and start steering your course, even when the winds are against you. People may call you cold, distant, or hard to read, but deep down you know it isn't detachment, it's self-possession. It's the calm that comes from deep understanding, not avoidance. And one day, you'll realize these lessons are no longer philosophy, they're how you breathe. When someone insults you, you smile, because you see they speak only from fear. When work collapses, you don't blame anyone, because failure is just another form of training. When someone leaves, you don't cling, because you've learned that loss too is part of the flow. The Stoics never taught you to avoid the storm. They taught you to stand still in the middle of it. And that is where true freedom begins. I don't know where you are in your journey right now. Maybe you're wrestling with your emotions. Perhaps you're learning to set boundaries. Maybe you feel lost or simply tired of the world. But if there's one thing I want you to carry with you from all of this, it's this: you are not powerless. Real strength has never been out there. It's within you, in every decision you make, in every moment you choose. Calm over chaos in every morning you rise despite not wanting to. Marcus lived this truth. Seneca wrote it. Epictetus proved with a life of hardship that freedom never comes from circumstance but from a mind that rules itself. So if today feels too much, stop, breathe, and remember, you are in training. Every challenge is a gym. Every emotion is a teacher. Every time you stay calm, you've already won. Keep practicing. Build your fortress within. And if this journey has meant something to you, subscribe to Sovereign Stoic. So each day, you can return to one reminder, one insight, one spark of strength to keep going. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it, so that the flame of inner freedom doesn't stay only in you, but spreads to others who are ready to awaken. Remember, life is short, but wisdom is long. Live awake, live steady, live true. Because in the end, dangerous intelligence is not about seeing through others, it's about seeing through yourself.